here a little bit. All I have to do now is either swipe 4 fingers left or 4 fingers right, and I can get to that individual application where it has its own workspace and doesn't have to compete with anything else just by swiping left or right using 4 fingers. You can also use a keyboard shortcut, which is Control and left or right arrows to get to whatever item you want. If you want to close one of the desktops, that's just as easy as well. Just simply swipe 4 fingers back up again, hover over one of the desktops, and an X will appear. If you click the X on each one of them, all of your items will be right back down here where you had them to begin with, and they're all back on one desktop again. And that's the basics of how to use multiple desktops. As always, it would be a huge help to us if you click that thumbs up button and like this video. You can also leave a comment or a question below if you like. Don't forget to check out our website at pcclassesonline.com and go join the conversation over on our Facebook page. Thanks again for coming. Class dismissed.
Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Today, let's talk about using multiple desktops on your Mac. MacMost is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 600 supporters. Go to macmost.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So one of the most powerful features of your Mac is the ability to have multiple desktops. But a lot of Mac users don't know about this feature and they could really use it. It's particularly useful if you have only one screen like most MacBook or iMac users do. You can use this to simulate having multiple displays, and it could really help you clean up your workspace and be more efficient. So take a look at what I've got here. I have all these different windows here open on this screen. But what I can do is get rid of this mess by using multiple desktops. Now this feature is sometimes called Mission Control. Sometimes it's called Spaces. Other people call it multiple desktops or using many desktops. Doesn't matter what you call it. The way to see your desktops is to use the keyboard shortcut Control up arrow. And this brings you into a mode called Mission Control. Mission Control gives you an overview of all your desktops. You can see at the top there I have one desktop, desktop 1. And if I move my cursor over it, it'll actually show me a small representation of the desktop. Below I'll see all of the windows in the desktop but kind of moved around so I can see them all clearly so they're not overlapping each other. To add a second desktop, all I need to do is click the plus button here and it adds desktop 2 and you can see that's empty. I could switch between them by simply clicking on them. So I could use Control up arrow to get here and then click on desktop 2 and now I'm at desktop 2. Control up arrow takes me back here and I can click on desktop 1 to go back to desktop 1. But a much easier way to do it is to use Control and right or left to quickly fly between these multiple desktops. On a trackpad, the default shortcut is to use 3 fingers on your trackpad and swipe with 3 fingers left or right to move between them. But you have to look in System Preferences to make sure you have that enabled. So that's under Trackpad and then More Gestures, and you can see here swipe between full screen apps. But what this really means is any kind of desktop. You also have Mission Control swipe up with 3 fingers. So instead of using Control up arrow I could simply do a 3-finger up swipe to get to the same place. Now I could add a third desktop if I want and then I can then use Control right arrow to go to the second one, Control right arrow to go to the third one, and then left arrow to go back to the other 2. Now to move something to another desktop I can do that one of several ways. I could actually click and drag this window and while I'm still dragging I can use Control and right arrow to move to another desktop and drop it there. That's kind of hard to do, to hold the trackpad and hit 2 buttons on the opposite sides of the keyboard. So a better way to do it is to go into Mission Control and from there you can move your cursor up to the top here to reveal all of these desktops. You could drag from the bottom here onto another desktop. So I can put the Safari window here on desktop 3. So now I've got desktop 3 with this Safari window on it. I can Control left arrow to desktop 2 with this Maps window on it. And then Control left arrow back to my first desktop with all of these windows on it. And I can use Mission Control to easily move things around. So while in here I can still use Control left arrow and right arrow to go between desktops. And then I can drag any window I see below here to any of these desktops to move it there. So you can see how this kind of simulates having 3 displays. Here's my first display. Here's my second display. Here's my third display. It's like I've got 3 screens even though I just have one MacBook sitting on my lap or one iMac sitting on my desk. I can only see one at a time, so it's not as good as having 3 displays, but it does help me clean up my workspaces. And note that you can have multiple windows from the same app on different workspaces. So here's a Finder window and here's a Finder window. I could take this one and move it to another desktop here. So I can put that on desktop 2. So desktop 2 might now have this Maps window open here and a Finder window open with files that relate to the task I'm doing here. On this desktop I've got a separate Finder window open for doing other things. So you can group the windows by what task you're doing. Maybe one's for writing, one's for doing research, another's for email. Now you can also easily rearrange these in Mission Control. So for instance if I wanted to swap these 2 desktops I could just click and drag them there. Notice the names don't stick with the desktop. So desktop 1, desktop 2, desktop 3, it's about the order they're in. If I switch 3 with 2 they just get renamed and so they're still 1, 2, and 3. Now there are actually 3 different types of things that you could have here in Mission Control. We've only looked at one of them, which is a full desktop. A second one is an actual full screen app. So let's go and create another Safari window here. I'll click on Safari and you notice it jumps right to that desktop with Safari on it. I'll open up a new Safari window and let's go to Mac Most on this window. Now I can go full screen with this app by clicking the green button here or going to View and then Enter Full Screen. Either one will take that app full screen. The menu bar is hidden. I can get to it by moving my cursor to the top. The dock is hidden but I can get to it by moving my cursor to the bottom. But otherwise this window takes up the entire screen. I can't change the window size. It goes from edge to edge. Now if I go into Mission Control you can see now I've got my desktop 1, desktop 2, desktop 3 and there's that full screen app. It goes in the list as well. So that's the second type of thing that could be here. A third type of thing is anytime you use split view, which is like full screen but with 2 apps instead of 1. So let's say I've got Photos open here and the Finder here and I want to put these both in a split view desktop. I can hover over the green button here and then I have the ability to tile window to the left or to the right. So let's move this Finder window to the right side of the screen and then it has me select another window that was on that desktop for the left side. And now I've got split view. If I go to Control up arrow for Mission Control you can see I've got desktop 1, 2, and 3. I've got that full screen Safari here and I've got this split view with Photos and Finder. I can drag the middle line here depending upon which apps I'm using. In this case the Finder can get pretty small on the right but the Photos can only go to about halfway. But now I've got this one desktop that is using 2 apps kind of sharing the screen. You can use Mission Control to exit this. Matter of fact Mission Control is a really handy way to have both of these apps leave their split screen view. Otherwise if I just hit the green button on one the other one gets stuck in full screen mode. But here I can click here and now it puts these both back on the original desktop they were on. I can get rid of any of these by using Mission Control and clicking on the X here. I can say get rid of desktop 3 and you can see that goes away. I can exit Safari's full screen mode by clicking here and that goes away as well. So there are a lot of different ways to use these. Some people like just to have apps in full screen mode. So they'll have everything full screen mode. And then they'll be able to use Control, left arrow, right arrow to go between full screen windows for each app. And it's actually no problem if you want to drag and drop because you can click to drag something like